Good afternoon, everybody. It is Kent Stones with Fake Not. And Fake Not is a community of professionals that are putting in the hard work to build brands in this era of fake, where there is so much today that we don't know whether it's real or not. And today, I have as my guest today, Dr. Sheana Ahlqvist. And she is a user researcher and principal consultant at PhD Insights. She's the founder of that organization. And she has served as the head of product and user experience at Ford Digital, where she's gathered user feedback to set product priorities in alignment with the different corporate goals. And prior to her time at Ford, she was the lead digital analyst at a digital marketing agency, where she was able to bring in her expertise and knowledge and the skills that led her to found her own company to help different brands increase their organic reach. And prior to all of that, she had completed her advanced graduate training at New York University and earned her PhD in quantitative social psychology from Stony Brook University. So as you can all see, I'm speaking to a real underachiever today.
I try to continue that in my day-to-day,
yeah. Yeah, in my spare time. But no, it's awesome. And I think one of the reasons, I think just for the audience, so you have a little context, Sheana and I were introduced through a mutual colleague who works at a really amazing company called the Right Brain Project. And we just were able to connect. We started talking about our different beliefs and perspectives on data analysis and cultural analysis and all those good things. And as usual, you find that you may start in different places, but then you ultimately arrive at this really cool kind of middle ground of understanding about your different perspectives. And so today, really fortunate to have you on the show today to talk about something I think that we felt was really interesting, and is looking at this whole aspect of how you can apply thought and perspective from the field of psychology into improving user experience. So you want to talk a little bit about your company, and I always love to hear why you started it in the first place.
Yeah, well, I'll start with that because I think it's kind of funny. So after leaving a really high-stress job, I envisioned a future where I laid on the beach and I had a machine cranking money out for me. And this consultancy was my first. This consultancy was my first attempt at that goal. So probably not the best reason to start a company, but maybe that's an honest one. So I'm a user researcher. So I help companies understand primarily on the technology side, why their users are there, and then use that information to make informed strategic decisions. So typically that might be making products more frictionless, giving the users what they really want when they want it, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think that was one of the areas where I think we had such an interesting discussion, was where, as we were talking about how you start to uncover those things. And, it's really, as you start thinking about it, it's kind of the art and science of data analysis. And so I think I've always felt that when you talk to a lot of business professionals, and not all, but many tend to fall in one camp or another. It tends to be, data is everything, making fact-based decisions, strip the emotion out of it, just make this rational decision and improve the probability of success. And then there's the other camp, which is, we're taking the humanity out of our decisions, and we need to understand human nature and emotion. And in fact, it reminded me of the book Malcolm Gladwell wrote, Blank, where he talked about how we can often analyze too much data, and it can actually lead us down the wrong path. And I think it was funny after that book came out. I don't know how many executives were like, hey, we don't need research. We got to go with our gut, and just, instinct will guide us down the right path. And it's like, I think you're missing the point of that book. Is that, it's the old saying, there's two stories, and then the truth falls somewhere in the middle. And I think that's what you and I have always talked about is this notion of, data is awesome. and it's very important to have that. But on the other side, we have to study culture and human nature, and understand, and that gives us the context, to be able to.
Absolutely. And it's funny. So like you mentioned, my degree is a quantitative degree. And so I come from a sort of different perspective where I'm a psychologist by training. So I think behavior, emotion, all those things are really important, but I come from a quantifying perspective. So like, how can we take those very abstract concepts and make them measurable, and hopefully, you can replicate them from time to time. And it's also interesting. I personally am a data person, obviously, but I'm also surprised to find how few people are convinced by data. Like you're saying, there's sort of these entrenched camps. Like there are data people and then there are not data people. So it's taken me a long time to understand that for me to convince people, the best thing that I can do is have the numbers and then tie it to some really nice emotional quote that tells a story. So I'm completely with you on they feel very different, and I find that if you pair them together, you can kind of check all the boxes.
That quick little side note to that, because I think that raises a really interesting point, that that anybody who is thinking about progressing in their career in analysis, but any real business person, what it suggests is you need to make sure that you are exposing yourself to a lot of varied disciplines as you go through your career. And that helps you. So for me, the amazing epiphanies that I've had were as I met anthropologists, because my degree actually is in quantitative marketing research methods as well. And, I was very, very analytic, quantitatively driven. But in meeting some amazing anthropologists who look at the world in a whole different way, but look at data as a very important part of that. I don't know, that really helped me shape my worldview about how to approach analysis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that I think the topic today that I wanted to just get your thoughts about was, as you mentioned, you're a trained psychologist. So you bring that perspective to being able to help understand how to understand needs, user experience, et cetera. So just love to hear your thoughts about how companies can leverage psychology in that way to improve the user experience, to enhance and focus on what they really need, and so forth. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and so in some strange ways, a lot of it will run counter to, I think, what you're trying to achieve here, which is to create brand trust, right? No, so but legitimately, I think a lot of what like a UX person with a psychology background can bring to the table is sort of like not tricks, but leveraging these almost like flaws in the human system to get people to stay, right? So I know we're going to talk about Facebook a little bit later, but there are like known cognitive biases that humans commit that you can use to your advantage when you're designing these different systems. And then at some point it becomes a question of ethics and trust, as you're saying, at what point is it too many things? At what point is it manipulating your users?
Okay, so that'll be a really interesting topic, because I think I would agree with you that the work that we're doing is based on the fact that there has been so much manipulation and exploiting things that we do. And I think, yes, Facebook will be an interesting conversation around that. But what are some of the ways? So talk about some of the ways that, though, you've applied theory or tools from psychology that have helped.
So we'll do some not so scary ones. So no, but so, I mean, it can be simple things for instance, on my website, there's a case study I go through where a user is onboarding to a new app, and the onboarding process is just really, really long. It's like screen after screen after screen. And one of the things that company failed to do that would be a recommendation I would make would be to motivate the user to complete a given step. So in that case study, it's a credit card management app. And so they had a lot of screens that said things like, link your account, but it doesn't motivate why you should link your account. So making that small change to link your account so we can manage your money is like very few additional words, but it's going to help the user understand why they should do that for you.
That's a, that's a great example. And I think, so we were recently talking a little bit with another guest around the whole idea of rewards and the importance of bringing the awareness and intent of an award into a communication. But what we were talking about was, it's interesting because a reward, if it's Skinner did this work around that, if a reward is actually a little more random, that it actually reinforces the behavior stronger than if the reward is consistent all the time. I just thought that was really fascinating.
No, totally. And I've written about this exact thing in the context of technology. So what's interesting is this is a great example. So to create a new user behavior, you actually want to have it consistent so that to make that learning happen faster. But once that behavior is established, you want to then switch to a variable reward schedule where you're sometimes rewarding them and sometimes not. And I mean, this is jumping ahead, but the Facebook news feed traditionally, or any other social media news feed, is a great example of a variable reward system where it's not like the best stuff is at the top, and then the farther you scroll down, the less interesting it becomes. It's mixed, right? Like some of the things are really cool and interesting, and then some of them are kind of boring or uninteresting or irrelevant. But the fact that it's mixed is what keeps you scrolling and scrolling and scrolling.
Oh, that's a really good example.
No, and like I said, if you imagine the opposite, because some people are like, wait a minute, so you're saying I shouldn't give my users the best stuff first, but then imagine what Facebook would look like if it was just like the best stuff at the top, and then worse and worse and worse stuff. Like you would never use it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, you'd be like, I see the top two, I'm done.
Yeah, I reached the bad part, and now I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah. So what? Okay, so that's a really good example. What are let's talk about some of the areas where maybe you have to be careful about how much you're manipulating. Are there any areas that you have to be very careful with your clients about, or often counsel them about? Okay, here's a way that we can encourage this behavior, do this or do that, or but we have to be careful about not. I'm not sure if I'm being very clear about.
I know what you mean. Sort of, where's the boundary?
Yeah. Where's the boundary?
Yeah. No, and I mean,
you should be doing these interviews.
I am definitely a filler in the sentence kind of lady. So sorry.
Yeah, and good thing I don't do this for my income.
No, but I wasn't going to say. Oh, yeah. So that doesn't come up all the time. But one of the things I was going to mention later is I'm just now creating a piece of content that looks into how ClassPass keeps their users from leaving. And it's a video breakdown of the step-by-step of like why each piece works and why it's a good decision. But at some point, so getting back to this question of trust, where is the line between I want to retain my users and I'm trying to trick my users into not leaving, right? And so there are certain things you can do to encourage them to stay by providing them more options. But then at some point it becomes like, we've all heard of these companies that you try to quit and they make you wait on hold, then you have to send an email or a letter. And in the end of the day, that ends up tarnishing the reputation of that company, right? It doesn't, even if you technically have more users, and this gets back to the difference between looking at a raw number and the full story. Even if you do successfully reduce your churn rate, like what's the cost? Like what is your reputation, your brand reputation among your users?
Yeah, I think that is such a fundamentally important concept that not only as our clients that we need to be guiding them on, but I think we personally as consultants need to be really cognizant of and making sure we're talking about those issues with our clients in a way, because I love that perspective of where's the boundary of just trying to keep them on the site through mental trickery or things like that. Because in our work around trust, I think one of the things that we found is really there's three kind of components to trust that are really important. The first is just competency. Are you good at what you do? The second is your integrity. And are you being honest? And do I feel that your work is with integrity? And the third element, though, is this idea of, do you have my best interest at heart? This idea of benevolence. And I think the first two, we always talk about, but it's that third one that is so important that, and ultimately at the end of the day, I do believe our clients, our customers, consumers will ultimately see what your intent has been. And so that's why I love your perspective about, hey, we got to be careful about, you can do this, but what is the long-term consequences? And that's a level of critical thinking that I think that just goes beyond, how can we get a 2% increase of click-through rate on this or that?
Absolutely. And I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but at some point I'd love for there to be a stronger program of education for users about the kinds of cues to be looking out for. So for instance, LinkedIn, they do such a good job at manipulating people and keeping them pulled in. I open up LinkedIn to look at one thing and bam, there I am scrolling through the feed. And LinkedIn's not even that interesting. So they're doing a very good job. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So it's kind of a nice segue into, we thought talking about Facebook would be an interesting topic. So with their, not that they've had any press at all about their role in all the election and the fake news and the fake accounts and, the whole the theory that we're all becoming more polarized due to social media, all this and all that. I'd love to hear your perspective about this whole notion of where they're saying now they're going to put the user first and the user experience first. And even becoming, to me, a little rigid about it. There was a couple of Facebook executives that recently were presenting at a conference, and Mashable was quoting them as saying to publishers, if this is the way that the experience is going to be, and if you don't feel it's a good fit, you shouldn't be on Facebook. Which is honest, But I mean, it's to me, it seemed like a very kind of pendulum swinging too far another way to approach how information and how Facebook works overall. Yeah. But do you?
This is a loaded question. There's a lot here. They got hit pretty hard, right? So they got hit hard by media companies that have come to depend on them for distribution.
Right.
They got hit by, their advertisers who basically, the reason that Facebook wants to keep you on Facebook as long as possible is the longer you're there, the more ads they're showing to you, and the more money they're making. So for them, there's a direct relationship between how long they keep you on their product and how much money they make. So that raised an interesting business question. So now that they're a public company and content is what's keeping people on Facebook, I mean, there's almost an ethical question for their investors of, if we make Facebook less addictive and that's bad for business, are we doing something wrong as Facebook, the company? But so to get back to trust, I would argue that this is actually a really good strategy for Facebook moving forward. So you've gotten to the place now where people, as you're saying, don't trust Facebook. They don't trust that they have their best interests at heart. And people are doing things like taking Facebook sabbaticals. Like my husband 2 years ago decided his New Year's resolution would be to leave Facebook because people are increasingly perceiving it as a waste of time. So I think in that sense, it's in Facebook's best interest to start switching back towards friends first, social connections first, right? So even though I might find it addictive and enjoyable now, I also know that it's bad for me. It's like the junk food of the internet. Whereas if they can start shifting back to personal connections, I think we're going to get more, hopefully, joy and enrichment out of it. And maybe we won't be there as many hours a day, but we'll be using Facebook in 5 years. Whereas, in the meantime, other people might have just quit Facebook and never come back.
I think, that's a great point to raise about when we think about the metrics for what is success. Because as you're talking about, okay, yes, there's the shareholders of Facebook. There's the executive team at Facebook. There's the users of Facebook. And I think you have to look at what is the overall impact of what we're doing, not just for one group versus another. And I think this is where a lot of companies have struggled, but I do see, and what's encouraging, I think, to me, is you are starting to see companies thinking more broadly like that, that the only way we're going to be successful is in enhancing the trust that our users have in us. And that means we may not make as much money as we possibly could have by manipulating or by following the old way of just maximizing shareholder return kind of a way of thinking. So I think it's pretty valuable, because I think there's in our work, what we have found is that trust tends to be along a spectrum. And, there's this very functional level of trust where all trust starts, and that it's very executional. Did the page load quickly when I like somebody, or does it show up? All those very executional things that I just expect to happen, and they happen, and I trust that those are going to happen. So, you've got to maintain that level of trust. But as it progresses toward a more emotional level of trust, that's where all those things like, do you have my best interest at heart? And I would say I agree. I think everybody, well, that's a broad term, but many people have felt just that I don't know if this is good for me. And just from, I think, the personal user experience that, and I think I just saw a story that the time people were spending on Facebook was declining.
That doesn't surprise me at all. And it's funny, I think I started using Facebook again a couple weeks ago, and I noticed it was a markedly less engaging experience for me. It's like, man, why are there are all these posts from people I know or groups that I'm barely affiliated with? But like eventually I'm going to adjust. What's also interesting too is getting back to this issue of trust is, I think in the long term, Facebook probably did this to regain their user trust. But what's interesting is whenever they make any changes in their algorithm, people revolt, right? And in part, I think it's because they're seeing for the first time how much control Facebook has over what they see. So I'm already seeing friends post in my feed like, Facebook's controlling my algorithm now, and I don't know what I'm seeing and what I'm not seeing. And the reality is they were always doing that. It's just that now the users are aware of it. So what's interesting is on top of engagement going down in the short term, you also might see trust dip in the short term because people are sort of aware of what's actually happening.
But I think, it's really important, even if trust does shift, because whenever there's a change or a shift like that, there's always going to be some consternation, uncomfortableness with change, all that kind of a thing. But I think, not only talking about what they're doing, but through their actions and the things they're doing in the communities that they're serving, that they continue to demonstrate that they have this idea and this vision of connecting the world and making it a social and enjoyable place for people to be able to connect friends and family and all that. They've just got to keep resolute about continuing down that path. And so that's going to be an interesting story to watch. And who knows, they'll probably change the algorithm again. I think they're constantly testing. So one of the things, hey, just appreciate the time that you took. One of the things I love to do is there anything interesting that you're working on right now, either personally or professionally, that's outside of our discussion?
Yeah, always way too many things. But I think the one that's most relevant for work is I am doing now a series of teardowns that look at the details of why different user experiences are effective. So I just created one looking at how ClassPass retains users. It's not totally public yet, but if you visit my website, which is phd-insights.com, you can view the Learn section, and that's where the teardown's going to be housed.
Oh, nice. Well, awesome. Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. A fascinating discussion on just ways that we can think about using other tools outside of our own professions to help think through some of the critical decisions that we have to make. And I'll get your site in the notes so that everyone can take a look at that. And
Thanks so much, Kent. You're doing really neat stuff over there. It's exciting to see.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. A lot of, it's always a lot more work than you anticipate.
Always.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.